So welcome to this webinar. This is a webinar about time. And we're going to call it managing time because one of the key things about time, obviously, is that it is this infinite resource, but it's also finite for us as human beings. So we need to manage time effectively, both professionally and personally. And that's what we'll be exploring in this particular session. This is a webinar which I am recording, and we're going to be doing a Q&A at the end so that everybody who is attending live has the opportunity, if they have any questions, to ask those at the end, and I'll do my very, very best to answer them. Now, this is a part of the apprenticeship programme from Cambridge Marketing College, and this is one of a number of supplementary topics and personal development items that we run alongside the topics which are the more kind of formal study subjects. So this is all about kind of personal development as well as professional development. And of course, for many of us, these things are kind of really running sort of hand in hand. So obviously really important. So what is time? Well, for me, it was quite an interesting starting point in putting together this webinar, because I thought, well, let's kind of see if we can find some definitions of time that actually resonate and mean something to us. So I've got two definitions of time. One is a noun and one is a verb, because it's all very well knowing the noun. And this particular definition defines time as the indefinite, continued progress of existence and events in the past, the present, and the future, and those regarded as a whole. In other words, it is the space between things and moments and occurrences and events. But that really doesn't help us in terms of our everyday processing of time and actually getting the most from our time. So to me, it was really important to put something in as a noun. Yes, to define things, but also really importantly to as a verb, to give us something we can actually action. So the verb of what is time is to plan, schedule, or arrange when something should happen or be done. In other words, being planful, being conscious about how we do what we do, when we do what we do, and the reasons behind it. Now, of course, for many of us, time is one of those things that we simply don't have, or we perceive we don't have enough of. And it's very important for all of us to be able to spend time or invest time in the right possible way to get the most from that time. Now, for most of us, we spend a lot of our time day to day procrastinating. So we don't actually action things. We don't actually do stuff with our time. We tend to find ourselves wasting a lot of time. I was just speaking to a client who said that he had a very frustrating phone conversation with somebody who spent more time complaining about an action that he'd been given than the actual time the action would have taken. Now, isn't that ironic? Isn't it ironic as well that we probably had to justify coming along and listening to this particular webinar here today? And isn't that ironic? Because, of course, if there's efficiency and effectiveness that we can gain by self-development and personal learning and trying tips and techniques that others have found successful, we simply can't make the time for those. Lovely irony there. I love irony, because it is a reminder to us all that we are on this journey of continuous development, professionally and personally. So when was the last time you spent more time complaining about something than the time it would have taken to simply get on with it? We all do it. Even those of us who might consider that we actually get a lot out of every day, we make the most of our time. We still find ourselves going down those little bunny holes on YouTube, late into the evening watching videos, or we find ourselves just sat in front of the television just consuming stuff, when actually what we could have done was to invest the time far more proactively, productively, to get more value from the time that we spend. Now, I'm not here saying that we should be filling every single waking moment being super busy and super effective. There is obviously time to have downtime. And downtime is part of this mix of, the effective use of time, because nothing compares to time. Time is your single most precious asset, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing more important. You can earn more money. You can get a bigger car. You can get a new relationship. All of these things are within your control. But the one thing that you can't control is the passage of time. It is going to happen whether you decide to plan it, decide to get the most from it, or not. So it is the single most precious asset that you have. So what I would encourage you to do, and in fact implore you to do, is just to be aware and conscious of that. Now, as I'm saying, it's not necessarily that you're going to then fill every waking moment, but just being a little more mindful over this passage of time, because the amount of time you've spent listening to this and being part of this, conversation here on this webinar so far is a passage of time. So it's really important that you kind of figure out, are you getting the most from the time that you're spending? And how will you use the rest of the time you have available to you today, for example? Because when we wake in the morning, we all begin the day with 100% in our bank account, 100% of energy, 100% of the time available. And then we start to spend it. When it comes to energy, I always find energy and time a really interesting combination, because with time and with energy, we do all begin with 100%. So the minute we wake in the morning, we have this resource and this asset available to us, but then we start to spend it. So we start to lose energy and we start to lose time by procrastination, by letting it being drawn out from other people. So people start to kind of eat into our energy. They might be sapping energy from us. They might be, taking our thoughts and our, the things that we could be devoting to something productive. They start to waste our time on our behalf. So this is all about being very conscious about how time is being absorbed and how time is being sapped away from you, and not spending too much time on things that are not valuable. So being distracted, being taken down roads that you don't want to be taken down, being having our energy sort of taken away, and particularly if you're an empathic person, so you're willing to kind of step into other people's shoes, and then they start moaning and complaining at you, spending time on the phone or in person, sapping your energy. Well, it's also sapping your time. So we have got this finite resource of 100% at the beginning of the day. So we've got to consciously be using this in a way that really suits us and those around us. So we have 24 hours of choices. Okay, this is a really important concept in the management of time. Your time is your time. And what I would actively encourage you to do is to avoid ever using the word busy. Busy is one of these kind of alternate kind of views of time and the use of time. And we all fall into this. How many times already today have you heard people say, oh, I'm really busy? And you ask them, well, how are you? Oh, well, I'm busy today. Busy is chaos. Okay, busy is not control and management effectively and efficiently of time. Busy is one of those excuses that we all use in our everyday language. And you're not busy. You've just simply made choices. You've made choices to not be conscious. You've made choices to not invest your time, but to just spend your time. You've made choices to be distracted. You've made choices to do one thing over another. You're not busy, you're just making choices. And I often hear this when I'm consulting and guiding people through, creating strategies and tactical day-to-day sort of activities in their lives or in their sort of professions. I often hear this, well, I'm kind of too busy to be doing that. I'm too busy. And I often find myself having to say to them, look, it isn't that you're busy. You have the same 24 hours that everybody else has. And okay, yes, we all need to be spending or investing some of that time in sleep because we all need to recuperate. But in the hours that you're awake, you're making choices of how you use that time. So let's not use the excuse busy. It is just a set of choices that makes you feel as though you're in this chaotic, out of control lifestyle and situation, but you're not. You just made a choice that put you into that situation. So by taking accountability and responsibility for the 100% asset that you have at the start of every day, and then deciding how you're going to use that asset is a really important starting point. I am going to share with you at the end of this relatively short webinar, I'm going to share with you a simple single technique that I use to juggle multiple businesses, multiple priorities, work for and on behalf of clients, as well as my own businesses, as well as actually having a nice work-life balance and blending all this stuff together. It's not because I'm super clever at this. I've just got this one simple technique that allows me to positively prioritize. And if I can positively prioritize, and this is a really kind of active way of managing time, and there are two key words there: positively prioritizing. And what I tend to do, what I tend to try and do, is positively prioritize out of this 100% of assets and time and resources I have available at the start of the day, positively prioritizing out stuff that is not going to be serving me or the others around me. So my clients, my family, my wife, others around me. If I'm positively prioritizing, it's hard to get the words out sometimes, positively prioritizing out stuff that is not serving me and those others, then I'm actually making some starting points which allow me then to create a really effective day in front of me. So it is simple things. When I'm positively prioritizing out, I will factor in work time as well as meeting time. Now, we all know this, if depending on what kind of role that you perform or what kind of business you're in, or what kind of things you fill your day with, we all sort of tend to put into our calendars and diaries meeting time, because that involves others. So it reminds us that we have to be there, albeit a certain point in time with others. But I would always making sure then that I'm actually factoring in production time or work time. Because otherwise what I'm doing is I'm in effect filling my day with meetings, which of course by their nature have a lot of chat and a lot of potentially what you could argue wasted time, or time that could otherwise be spent in production. I have to make sure, because I produce stuff, because I produce content, I produce plans, that I give myself enough time in between those meetings or around those meetings in the calendar. So these are things that I've prioritized in, enough work time to supplement and complement the meeting time. And most of us don't do that. We fill our day with meetings, with get-togethers, with Zoom calls, with whatever it is, and then we forget to actually factor in the production time. So then we find ourselves squeezed in delivering against the promises we make in those meetings. So give yourself enough time. And it is not a bad thing to say, look, I'm sorry, I don't have availability today, or I don't have availability tomorrow. You don't say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm too busy, because that implies you're too chaotic. But saying I don't have availability is a very positively prioritized way of clarifying the situation. Now, when we're talking about meetings, one of the key things here is that we spend collectively, and I do this too, a lot of time in pointless meetings. Now, I'm not saying the meetings are pointless, but they might be to us. So always, when you have a meeting invitation, do two things. This is, simple little things that we forget to do, and I forget to do this myself. So again, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but if we were to do this, we would increase the availability of our time. So first of all, figure out whether that meeting has an agenda that you can contribute to. And I mean contribute to, not sit there and listen, because you can just read the meeting notes afterwards if that's all you're going to do. So are you going to be able to contribute to that meeting? And if so, at what point in that meeting are you going to be able to contribute? And do you really genuinely need to be there for the whole meeting? Saying no to being at a whole meeting, or even being at a meeting at all, is a really positive way of proactively prioritizing out stuff that's not helpful. Because if you're not adding value, then just because you have a presence in that meeting is not giving a good outcome to the person who's arranged it. So don't think that you're kind of taking something away from them. Don't think that you're being mean or just unhelpful. You're not. You're actually helping them in their efficiency and value as well. The other thing that you can do is to make sure that you are avoiding meetings where you are, as we've said, not able to actually contribute effectively, but where actually your agenda isn't being served. In other words, if this is a meeting that really is not contributing to your world and your resources and your assets, then it could be something that you decide you are going to challenge and say, look, I'm very happy to contribute something maybe in advance of the meeting, give you a little bit of a briefing, but I'm not going to see that I'm actually able to contribute enough to make it worth me being there. So I'd like to decline this invitation on this occasion. And that's not saying you're being unhelpful. It's just on this occasion, I have other priorities which are going to take precedence. And people, believe it or not, and this does include your line manager as well. And for a lot of people, if they're in an employed situation or have clients to serve, think, oh no, because my line manager or my client has asked me, I have to be there. No, you don't. They will respect you for this. Trust me on this one, play with it, explore it. As long as you do it authentically, as long as you do it in a positive way and you give them alternatives, they will respect your decision. And this is all about living by your agenda, not others. Okay, this is all about understanding that your time is your time, even if you are being paid by the hour or you're employed, it's still your time. This is time that you will never have again. Okay, this is not a negotiable thing, and this is the truth. Nobody else's time, even if they're paying for your time, is their time. Okay, this is your time. So live by your agenda. Yes, you can integrate theirs into yours. Yes, you can help them with value and serve them well. All these things are really important in professional life as well as personal life, but it's your agenda, not others. So make sure that you are thinking as you start to prioritize and think about this 100% asset that you have available to you at the start of every day, that you're prioritizing in stuff that works to your agenda. Now, we often see this when somebody comes to you and says, oh, I'm in this panic, or oh, I've got an emergency, and they try to then suck you into their time. Your emergency is not my emergency. Your panic is not my panic. It's a great mantra to go in with, because people, particularly if they are of this kind of nature and this kind of style, will try to suck you into their agenda. They'll try to suck you into their world and say, look, I've got this really urgent deadline. You've got to help me with this. And you can just feel the angst and the energy, and it's not a positive place to be. It's their agenda, it's their time, it's their emergency, it's their panic. You can serve them. You can choose to support them, and that is a good thing. You can choose to add value, but it's their agenda, not yours. It's their time, not yours. Okay, so being very mindful in effective management of time understands that boundary, that clear water between other people's time and agenda and yours. Now, as I say, this is about being empathic. This is about actually serving in the correct kind of way. This is about understanding that there are choices to be made here. And it's also about trying to reduce the confusion. And it's not about confusing urgent with important. And we all do this. Suddenly when something is super urgent, we think that it's actually important. The two things are mutually exclusive. Just because something has to be done right now doesn't necessarily mean that it's important. And just because something is important, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be done right now. Now think about what we're talking about here. Some things clearly are urgent and important. Are we starting to prioritize? Yes, we are. Some things are not important and they're not urgent. So clearly they're less relevant to you in the way that you create the use of this 100% asset that we're calling time. So don't confuse urgent with important, because often with urgency comes noise, comes shouting. It's like, oh, help me, this is really, really urgent. Oh, my boss has asked me for this. And you hear this kind of chaos and panic, and that is perceived as important. It might not be. And actually the fact that it's urgent doesn't necessarily mean it's adding value to you or them. It might just be felt of as urgent. So try and get this distinction between the two. If you can separate these, you start to then see where value is really coming. And value comes in two distinct forms. It comes strategically, and by strategically, I mean in the longer, maybe in the medium to longer term, or tactically in the short term. But be thinking about value in your management of time. Where is the value coming from here? And try, if you can, to keep clear water between stuff that's important and stuff that is urgent. Because then we're starting to get a clarity of thinking that we can bring into play in the way that we then decide, well, what are we going to do over the next few minutes, over the next hour, the rest of today, this week, this month, this year? We start to be able to then split things out into their rightful place. And this is the technique that I'm building up to. And I'll be sharing that with you very, very soon. And for me, most of this stuff, when we start to use time in a really conscious, really mindful way, most of this stuff is defined in terms of the value you get from your time by the Pareto Principle. If you haven't come across this, I suggest you research this. Search Pareto Principle or 80-20 rule, because everything, absolutely everything, works by the 80-20 rule. This was quite an old now, a couple of 100 years old now, principle that defines everything in economics in the world in terms of the return that you get from the investment in something. So if you basically look at your customer base, for example, and that is 100% of your customer base, 80% of your customer base is giving you 20% of the return that you get, so your revenues. But interestingly, 20% of your customer base is giving you 80% of the returns or the revenue from that customer base. It's always 80-20. So if you can figure out the 20% of the things that you're going to be doing that will give you 80% of the value, and just know that it is that rule, it does work, then you can be conscious that you're spending just 20% of your time to get 80% of the value of your day. This starts to get really interesting, because this starts then to give you the indication of, if there is a way I can divide out my day and actually prioritize the things that really I should be focusing on, the things that I really have to focus on, and some of the stuff I can put aside, maybe if I focus on the things that are just at the top of the tree, that top 20% of things, and lose the rest of the 80, I can still get 80% of the value of doing all those things. Now it becomes super interesting, because this is what we call prioritization. And what I want you to think about is how you could prioritize every moment. Okay, so I'm not talking necessarily, if you're not a planful person, this might sound really uncomfortable. But I know if you're listening to this or watching this, either in this live webinar or watching this on catch up, I know that you're going to be looking to get more from the time that you have available, that 100% of resource or asset that you have when you wake up in the morning. So if you were to prioritize and try and find the top 20% of things that I should or must be doing that I know are going to give me 80% of the value from this day, well, is that 80% of value from the day better than what you did yesterday? It probably is. If you take out procrastination, time wasting, drifting, going down those YouTube bunny holes that I talked about before, all of those things that just wastes this precious asset that we have, this infinite asset of time. If we could prioritize every moment and get that 80% of a return from our day, wow, how would we feel at the end of the day? So there's a very, very simple technique that you can use, okay? And it really is super, super simple. You've just got to do it. You've just got to play with this and see how it works for you. So it's called must, should, could, now, soon, later. Okay, so must, should, could. This is the first half of the technique. So what I would suggest is you get yourself a piece of paper, or you get yourself a flip chart and maybe some post-it notes, or maybe just a pen, and just start making a list. But post-it notes are great, because as you start to produce your list, you can actually then move things around, because inevitably things will move. And put all of the things that you plan to do today, or this week, or this month, you can decide on the timescales into must, should, and could. Okay, and I want you to be super, super honest with yourself about the answer here. Things that you must do. You can do this for a campaign. You could do this for a marketing project. You could do this for a new product. You could do this for, your life over the summer, your personal life over the summer. You could do this for, how to begin a new interest in your personal life. You can use this in a multitude of different ways, but you have to define what you must do in that list of things, what you should do, and what you could do. So for me, I'm going to do this as an example just for my working day, okay? And I'm just using random things in here just as an example, but you need to go down and drill down as deep as you can to make this meaningful to you. Okay, so in my must list, I must focus on project X. I must focus on reporting a particular campaign back to my client. I must focus on taking some time out at lunchtime for a walk, etc., etc. And all those things, they're not in the should category, they're in the must, because I must get paid for that project. I must see the result of that campaign. I must take a little bit of time for myself, because otherwise I'm going to burn out. So those are really in the must category. And they really are must, so they are going to happen. I'm not deciding at this point when they're going to happen, they're just in the must category. So you are committing to yourself that they are going to happen. There's also a should category, and these are things that should happen. If I can get the musts done, then these should provide me with some value. And that will be, I need to look at all my emails in my inbox. I need to probably make some cold calls, or I need to call the agency, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So things I should do, given a fair wind, given the opportunity to finish all my musts, these are things I probably should do as a professional, doing the job that I do, running the business that I run, having the clients that I have. These are kind of the things that I probably should do. And the word should is an interesting one. It's a kind of a semi-commitment. It's not like must. Must is going to happen. Should happen. They're things I should do, but it's a slightly softer commitment. And the third category, which I'm going to put all of the things that are relevant into, is the could category. So things that I could do. So I could run campaign B, I could develop a web app, I could go on that photo shoot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're not things I should do, but I could do them. So if I can do all the must things, I can get all the should things out of the way, then I could do these things. But as you're probably already gathering here, will I ever really get round to the coulds? The chances are no, but it's possible. So what I'm doing is I'm capturing them and saying, look, they are on my list, they are relevant, they are appropriate, and I could do them, but they're not things that I should do, and they're definitely not things that I must do. My life will not stop, my professional, personal life will not stop if I don't get to those. And so this allows me to prioritize up to try and find this top 20% of things. The 20% of things that are giving me 80% of the value are definitely not in the coulds. They're probably not even in the shoulds. There might be the odd one if I've got a small list of musts, but probably most of them in the shoulds are not actually going to give me that 80% of value. So now my focus turns to the musts. And what I'm going to do in the musts is I'm going to run them through another filter, which is the now, soon, and later filter. Okay, so each of those musts I treat individually. So project X, is that something I must do? So I know I must do it, but must I do it now? Or must I do it soon? Or must I do it later? Can I afford to do it a little bit later? I mustn't necessarily do it right now, but I must do it at a certain point. And again, by just saying it's not necessarily today, this hour, next month, or whatever, not putting a time scale against it, this is relatively. Okay, so all of my musts, I must do them, and relatively then now. So in other words, it would be pretty much the next thing I'm going to do. So it's a must now. Well, that is going to be the top priority. A must that comes soon, well, I'm going to do those after the must nows, but a must soon is more important probably than a should soon, and certainly more important than a should later. And of course, if anything comes as a must later, well, I must do it, but I can afford to park it. So you're playing this kind of juggling act to try and see if you can form or see if you can manifest out this list of priorities. Now, depending on what you see in your list of must, should, could, and then take all the musts and run them through the filter now, soon, later, you might find, well, you will find that you've got a must now, or maybe a few must nows, so you're going to do those first. And then once you've done those, you might then see, well, look, I've got a should now, and I've also got a must soon. So which of those comes first? The answer is in your head, right? So you've got to decide this. I'm not going to tell you whether a must soon is more important than a should now. It's probably the should now in terms of urgency, but if the must soon, hopefully you're following this, if the must soon is going to give me more value, then I probably would do that before the should now, because it is just a should, and I've committed categorically to all of the musts. So that might be a little bit more important and give me a little bit more value. But the point is, okay, I'm talking semantics here. The point is that must, should, could gives you that set of musts. Your 20% is going to come from those. And your now, soon, later just starts to put them into a bit of a hierarchy. And it isn't in the order that you put them in Post-its or in your list. Go through each one individually. It's a binary decision here. So you're looking at each one to get this list of priorities, and it's in the order that you probably should do stuff. And if you then look at that list and say, well, actually, that's not the normal kind of day, then, okay, reflect on that. What is that telling you? What does that mean? It's going to give you a different perspective, maybe on the day ahead or the week ahead, or even the month ahead. You decide on the timescales. But what it does is it gives you positive, proactive prioritization. It gives you that opportunity to stop for a moment, take stock of where you are, and decide what it is you're going to be focusing on. And the focus of time, the allocation of this 100% of asset of resource that you've got that we're calling time at the start of every day. Imagine if you were to do this at the start of every day. It means you're getting better value automatically by focusing on the must-nows. And the must-nows are different for you than they would be for me and the person down the street. And that's what's powerful about this. The process and the technique simply works because it's so simple. And because you can adapt it every day, every month, every week, whatever you want to do it in terms of frequency, you can adapt this to the scenario and the situation you're in. How frequently would you do it? Well, I tend to do it when I've kind of used up all the musts, because I don't want to necessarily get into the shoulds, because they are just shoulds. You know, I should do it, but have any other musts now arisen? Are there now things that would be on a must list if I went through the exercise again? Or have any things that have been in the should list now, because of the world changing around me, should they now be in the must list? And of course, if you're using post-its, you can have this on the wall and be moving them around. So as you do stuff, everything changes. But it gives you the opportunity to manage your time effectively. And that is the key to the process. And once you've done that, and you've got this opportunity to prioritize every moment that you choose, you don't have to be getting, completely religious about this. You can do it as frequently or infrequently as you like, but you just know it's there when you feel that sort of chaos moment coming on, or when things just start to get a little bit too much to handle. Dip into must, should, could, now, soon, later, and you'll find instant clarity. It'll strip out all of those things you don't need. And really importantly, if you're working in collaboration, or if you're reporting to somebody, a client or a line manager, it gives you the opportunity to share the list with them. You can then discuss it, and you can agree that that is actually serving you as well as it is serving the organization. And that's important. You never then need to feel that you're going into a meeting saying, I can't do that because I'm too busy. Remember, we're never going to use the word busy again. You'll be going into that and saying, look, I've got these priorities. Do you want this to come in as a higher priority than the stuff I've already got scheduled in? Because I'm up to 100% capacity here. And these are the things that form that 100% capacity. What do you think? What do you want me to be doing? Do you want me to remove that and put this in? Because the capacity is 100%. And by the way, this is my time. It's not your time, line manager or client. This is my time. So I'm managing this, and I'm happy to move things around. We can discuss and agree, but let's do this in a controlled, systematic fashion, because you cannot logically take this to 101%. So people who talk about 101%, there is no such thing. 100% is 100 of 100 units. So you cannot go beyond your capacity. So this is a lovely way of getting collaboration, discussion, and agreement over your priority list, so that you can prioritize every moment with confidence, being assertive, and communicating in a way that really allows you, and this is the really important piece here, to invest your time, not spend your time. Investing your time means you're going to get a return. Spending your time means you're just spending it. You don't know what the return is. But do this consciously with something like must, should, could, now, soon, later, and you've actually got an opportunity here to see that 80-20 rule manifest in front of you, doing the 20% of things that give you 80% of the value. And if you can actually do, 20% of things that give you more than 80% of the value, then great, you've beaten the rule. It is possible, I've seen it done. But that's generally what we're aiming for here. So thinking about investing your time, a little bit more planful maybe than your everyday, but just being conscious that you have this 100% of time available to you in this day, and just thinking and crafting how you're going to invest that time, not just purely spending it. So I'm going to open up to using the chat facility for a quick little Q&A to see whether or not there's anything that's sort of popping into your head now. That's the kind of the formal bit of the presentation, if you like, and lots more kind of presentations and podcasts like this on the Cambridge Marketing College podcast or my podcast, the Neil Wilkins podcast. If you're not subscribed to both of those, I would strongly suggest you do. Use the chat facility if you're watching this live at the moment. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask me about the use or the management of time within your day, or if you're watching this on catch up and you want to ask me any questions, is use the message facility at the bottom of this recording, or you can DM me and you'll find me online in social at Neil Wilkins X, so you can find me there. So one question I've had come through already is, how do I say no to my line manager? Interesting question. Well, I don't think you actually necessarily need to say no to your line manager. I think what we're crafting here is the opportunity, not necessarily to say no, never, but just the opportunity to say no, not now. Because again, if we go down this now, soon, later thing, what you might just be saying to them is, look, I know you've asked me to do this, but can we agree that these are the things which you gave me as priorities actually are still priorities? So I'm not saying no, never. I'm just saying no, not now. There's a very different way of saying no. A lot of us don't like to say no, and I've covered this in previous webinars because it crops up quite a lot of the time in communication, because we like to appear and be seen as really helpful people, and we think that actually saying no is a negative thing and that we'll be seen in a negative light. We're not. Generally, when you say no but give the reasons behind it, when you say no but give the priorities, you give no but give a justification in a positive way for saying no, people will respect it. They can then see and figure out for themselves, oh, okay, I can see why you're saying that. Okay, no, that's fine. It wasn't as urgent as I was making out anyway. And I've seen that on countless occasions. You know, people often come to you and say, oh, can you just do this? And that word just, again, is one of the big inhibitors when it comes to the use of time. Nothing is ever just. You've got to put it through the filter. Must, should, could, now, soon, later, because a lot of the justs are going to fall into the could category, and so you're probably never going to want to do those anyway. But just be conscious about how that is presented to you. But if you need to say no, think about whether you're saying no permanently, which is no, never, or you're saying no, but not now. I think that is probably a better way of using it. So just being honest with time. Another question come through, can you describe the 100% energy again? Yeah, this is an interesting one, because for me, I kind of finding myself sort of linking this whole idea about time. I find time a fascinating sort of concept, and I find time and energy, the amount of energy I have at the beginning of the day, kind of intrinsically linked to time. So they're kind of interwoven. So energy and time are really, for me, really linked together. And I know that as an introvert, some things that I do, some things that I spend time on will actually sap my energy, and some things will allow me to kind of boost my energy as I go through the day. And for me, spending time alone on the bike or in the garden, doing a bit of gardening, or cycling, or in the waves, surfing, allows me to recoup some energy. So for me, that's conscious use of time to recoup some of the energy. If you're an extrovert, it kind of works in the opposite direction. So your use of time is probably about not doing something solo at lunchtime, for example, but actually meeting up with people and actually, sharing lunch together, going to the park for a picnic at lunchtime, or, just grabbing somebody on the phone and having a good old chat. And that will fuel you. So consciously using time to refuel yourself as you go through the day is really important, and knowing yourself. So I'm not here to tell you you've got to take time out to refuel yourself, so giving yourself private time, because as an introvert, that's how I do it. If you're an introvert, that's probably how you're already doing it. But if you're an extrovert, you're going to refuel in a very different way. So I think this use and understanding of time and allocating specific, proactively prioritized time for refueling within the day, even if it's only 10, 15 minutes. Some people like to meditate. Some people like to go for a run. Some people like to hit the gym, either with others or without. You've got to figure out what works for you. And I think as long as you are doing this in a productive way and a prioritized in a way that suits you, then it's the right use of time. But make sure you're being kind to yourself and investing the time in you. So it's not spending time doing stuff that doesn't really add to your day and add to your energy levels. It's investing time. So if you're finding that as an introvert, you're being sort of pulled to being social all the time, then it's about maybe being assertive and saying, look, no, not every time. I need a little bit of time for myself and I'll come back stronger. So for me, that's kind of how it works. And I think, yeah, it's just about understanding that introvert extrovert thing when it comes to energy, because it's really, really important. You want to come to the end of the day feeling enthused and feeling full of energy, not feeling drained. So by allocating time appropriately and knowing how you kind of feel best when you're either with people or spending time by yourself, you'll know if you really go inward and reflect on that, you'll know which you are. So make more time to be able to do that. And be proud of being whichever you are. If you're extrovert, be proud of that interaction and that socialization and really enjoy it. If you're introvert, be proud that you can take yourself off and spend time alone and that you don't need that interaction to refuel. It's all about knowing yourself, really. I think we're getting onto more psychological stuff here, but it is important that use and proactive management of your energy levels is all intertwined and interwoven with time. So yeah, making those two things work together is super, super important. And the final question I think we've got is, can I just go back to the slide which showed must, should, could? Yes, I can. There we go. So it is about just thinking about all the things that you've got either in your project or in your campaign or in your day-to-day or in your week ahead. This is all about you deciding about how am I going to prioritize every moment or every task or everything that I have available to me to do. So these are the assets and the resources within time that you're going to do. So just be honest as to which ones go into must. Be really quite critical over things. They've got to qualify to hit must. A lot of them will probably fall into should. You find that the vast majority will be in the should category. And be honest with the things that are in the could category. Things in could, they're going to plead at you. They're going to look at you with those little doggy eyes and sort of say, oh, please, please, please move me up to should and could. I want to be in your prioritization, but you've got to be honest with them and say, look, I could do you, but I'm not going to. So kind of think of them as things that you're being kind, cruel to be kind. Just think of these things as things that, yeah, in a fair wind, I might get to you, but actually we both know, don't we, I'm not going to. But that's fair. You've got to be fair on your agenda. So that is really what this is all about. So prioritizing every moment and then putting them through now, soon and later, so you know then when these musts are going to happen. That's really important in the whole thing about investing, not spending time.